Subcommittee. And I will pass on to Patrice.
Hi all, Patrice Guillory here with the Office of Reentry and Justice at the Probation Department. And by the way, I will probably have to jump off a little early today, but hopefully that doesn't mess up quorum.
Okay, great. And Melissa?
Hi, I'm Melissa Clavoon. I'm an assistant sheriff at the Sheriff's Office, and I oversee our Administrative Services Bureau, and I will pass off to Bill.
I'm Bill Walker, representing Contra Costa Health Services Department. And just to note, this will be my last meeting of the data subcommittee. I'll be handing the reins over to Gilbert Salinas, the Chief Equity Officer for Contra Costa Health Services. And that will be, we'll formalize that with, I'll be emailing Patrice. We'll go through that data, but he's been formally appointed by Director Anna Roth. And so he will join, obviously, the next meeting of RJLB. I guess it'll be up to him to which subcommittee to be on. So we'll go from there. Thanks.
Well, we're certainly going to miss you, Dr. Walker. You've been here since I think since the very beginning, haven't you? I feel like.
Yeah, since distant times.
Distant times, the time before time, the land before time. Yes. Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for all your years of service here, and we will welcome Gilbert if he comes to our subcommittee, and I'm sure we'll see him at the larger body. So, okay, let's have Melvin.
Afternoon, Melvin Russell. I'm the Assistant Chief Probation Officer. Good to see you all.
Nice to see you, Melvin. And Jill?
Sorry, Jill Ray with Supervisor Anderson's office.
Okay, and how about Aaron? Aaron Williams, are you there?
Yes, my name is Aaron Williams Sr., and I'm with a Safe Return Project in Richmond, California. Graduating fellow new organizer and mentor.
Nice to have you here, Aaron. Thanks for being here.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, and Aaron has another person with him. Who's that?
That's my junior.
Hi, Aaron Jr. Welcome to the meeting. How about? Okay. Oh, okay. How about Dale?
Yes. Hi. I feel like a peeping Tom. I show up at these meetings and just look.
Well, we're happy to have you here.
Look and listen.
Nice to meet you and have you here. Are you from an organization or just a member of the public?
Well, I'm a member of CAB and ACOA, but I'm not representing them here. I'm just an interested person from the public.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here.
Advisory Council on Aging to define ACOA.
Thank you. Great. And Ozzy, is that how you say your name, Ms. Carter?
Yes, that is correct. Afternoon, everyone. Ozzy Carter, board member from Community Advisory Board, also from a board member, Alcohol and Other Drugs. And basically, I'm here to represent CAB and to attend these data subcommittees and to report back what I'm learning.
Great. Well, thank you for being here to our new guests here. And does anybody have any other further announcements or anything they want to share with the group? Okay, Christina, I'm sorry, I didn't call on you.
Oh, no worries. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Jackson. I'm a planner evaluator with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Thanks for being here, Christina, and thanks for filling in for Nicole with the logistics. Appreciate that. Is there anybody who'd like to make a public comment on any item under the jurisdiction of the RJOB Data Subcommittee, but not on the agenda? Patrice.
If I can, I'm not sure if it's, I was going to say it during announcement, but if there's a way I can merge the two. I do want to just simply say that I'm encouraged to see Ozzy here as well as Dale representing the community advisory body that advises the Community Corrections Partnership on its AB 109 funding. And the reason why that is so important to RJOB is because there has been some calls out in the body's recommendations, and I believe in a few work plans about making some connection points between services that are being funded through AB 109, or at the very least, there's some recognition of AB 109 and public realignment within RJOB's recommendation. So being able to create that synergy then between the Community Advisory Board, which is very active and does some incredible work, for them to be a part of our meetings is one thing. I just wanted to uplift that and say I'm encouraged that they're here today.
Thank you for that, and definitely agree. And it's nice because we have on our agenda to look at our work plan, so that will be a good coincidence there. Any other public comment on anything else, or anything else from any of the members? I see Miss Cheryl's just joining us right now. Good afternoon, Cheryl. Would you like to give an introduction? We're just finished. We just finished the last person, so you could jump in and introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Hola, Cheryl Sade, Racial Justice Oversight Body, part of the Diversion Subcommittee, and I'm always here, so I'm one of your shadow members in the Racial Justice Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Cheryl. We appreciate your attendance at all of these subcommittees. You're so dedicated. We appreciate that. Okay, so I think we can move to our first item. Oh, sorry, Cheryl, go ahead.
Can I just say this?
Yes.
Yes. Happy Women's History Month and Women's History Year. And she se puede. Not si, she.
It is
That's
true.
it. Thank
We
you.
can do it. We can do it. We can do it for sure. Great. Okay, so we can move to our first action for today, which is to consider the approval of the record of action. Does anyone have a motion to approve or any revisions or changes that need to be made in the record of action?
I move approval.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Anyone second?
I second.
Thank you. Was that Patrice? Okay. And Christina, will you take a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Becky,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
Patrice,
Yes.
LaShante, who I don't believe is here, Dr. Walker,
Yes.
and Shayla Boner, who's not here. So that is 4. Motion passes.
Thank you. Any public comment about the record of action? I guess we should have done that before we voted, huh? Sorry, out of order. Okay, so let's move on to number 4. It says debrief community data forum from February 16th. Is somebody prepared to talk about that? I think that was Shayla and Chris who were organizing that. Was anybody else present at the community forum who'd like to speak about it? Okay. Well,
I'll say I was there in attendance to help support, but I will just at least kind of give some generalities about how the data session or listening session went. So there was a presentation on the data that's been reported on the RJOB website. There was a spoken word artist that kind of opened up the listening session just to engage those that attended. And I want to say there was maybe about 30 or so people that attended on the call that evening. There were a lot of questions regarding the data and what it meant, and some interest in essentially getting a little bit more information down to the city level with regards to some of the information that was shared. So I think overall, though, there was not necessarily a lot of conversation around translating what they learned from the data into, okay, what are the next steps from here? It was just more or less a recognition of the disparities and challenges that we're faced with within the criminal justice system. So that it kind of just landed there. At least that's my view of it. I don't know if any others wanted to speak to it that may have been in attendance. So I'm not quite sure what will be the next steps from there. I'm assuming that maybe the community engagement and funding subcommittee will do some form of debrief if they haven't already. My understanding is that they would like to do more of these listening sessions. Yeah, that's essentially where things landed.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. Any public comment or other comment from other members of the panel who may have been present at the Community Data Forum on the 16th of February? Okay, seeing none, I guess we can move on to the next item, which is the update on data request capacity for data analysis. And we don't seem to have anybody's name next to this. Is this, Patrice, something you were going to talk about?
Not necessarily, but I'm happy to at least provide an update from, I'm not sure if many folks on the call attended the last PPC meeting last month where the Racial Justice Oversight Body update took place. That also involved conversations around data requests and how that would be facilitated and supported going forward, or at least a recommendation for how that should be going forward. So I'm happy to share that in conjunction with whatever was going to be the follow-up item that led to this agenda item today.
Okay.
I can also add a little bit more context to that, since our office is the one that put it on the PPC agenda, because I recognized sort of the wall that we hit with ORJ being in probation and the challenges and all of that. So staff was directed to go back to CAO's office and talk about this issue that has come up with data analysis and collection. And so there has been some internal discussions, and our office is pursuing it a little further to see what more can be offered before the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice is lifted, which ultimately will be at the home of RJOB. And rather than waiting, because we're not sure exactly when that's going to happen, to see what can be done in the interim. So we're still in discussions on that.
Okay. Yeah, so we had started to draft a letter to send to follow up on the requests and that were made at the city managers meeting. Is that what it was? The city managers meeting was the last one, right? And we decided to pause on that until this was kind of resolved a little bit and what we were actually asking. Right. So that's kind of the update for the larger group, is that we had been working on that request, but since there's some, it just hasn't been settled who's going to actually receive that. It's hard to kind of finalize and get people to sign on the dotted line. Yes, I would like to share my data, if we're not sure what we're asking them, with whom we're asking them to share it. So
yeah, and if I can add a little more context.
Yeah, please.
At this point, you know, RJOB has made requests via presentations to Police Chiefs Association, to the Mayor's Conference, and we got on the Mayor's Conference agenda by way of Supervisor Anderson. So there is at least commitment from PPC members to see that the data elements of RJOB's work is accommodated to, you know, to a degree. I think where the challenge lies is that in collection of that information, right? Because we could send out various requests of specific data points, but then in retrieving that information, doing the analysis of that information, and then to do so on an ongoing basis to then tell us, you know, other than what's the status of the system that we, for the most part, currently know, as we currently know it. So I think this point, at least from what I recognize from the PPC meeting, that that being able to have between the CAO's office and PPC sort of facilitating those requests to be sure that there's an alignment of what it is that we're asking for, what it is that we are attempting to do, and then therefore, help to move RJOB's work along. I know this body has made requests also of the DA's office as well. So a lot of those things, it might behoove this committee to really think through sort of our own re-strategizing or next steps, given that we might want to put a hold on sending out these requests until some of those other pieces are ironed out. And then we can see where we go from there.
Okay, great. Any public comment about this item? Okay. Seeing none, we can move on to the next item, which is an update on the police trainings on adolescent development. And Denise, was that going to be you?
I will speak to one aspect of it. And Melissa, I think if I have it correct, you have an update also on the post side of things?
I do. Go
Okay.
ahead, Denise. And I'll
Okay. Well, I understand it's been posted in the second agenda for the Board of Supervisors meeting on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, that item number 5 will be a discussion surrounding the prioritization of the federal community funding projects, which will include our Policing the Teen Brain projects. So if anybody is available, willing to be there to support this project and the importance of it, and speak to it on behalf of this body and others who are rallying around this, please try to attend. There are directions while the Board of Supervisors meetings are opening up to in-person contact. There are in-person meetings, there are mechanisms in place to call in and to respond to items on the agenda. So, this project is not a shoo-in. We've got some other projects that are up with the DA's office and other projects. So any additional support that we can get from the community and our own leadership to speak to the supervisors about how important it is will be really important. And if you don't know how to access the Board of Supervisors meetings and you want to get that information, please email me for those of you in the community.
Thank you, Denise. Can I ask a question about that? When you said that it's item 5 on the agenda, does that mean that it'll be like within the, I know this is probably not a hard and fast answer, but does it mean it's like going to be within the first hour, within what are we talking about in terms of?
I know. I wish I could tell you, Becky. I really don't know. I honestly don't know. It depends upon the depth of other topics. Mm-hmm. And Jill, you might have a better sense of that than I do.
So the agenda hasn't been published yet. So all I'm working off is the draft agenda. So I can't even tell you at this point in time what the timing is. If it comes out during the time frame of this meeting, I should be able to look at it and give you a ballpark, but it hasn't been published yet. Should be published anytime now.
Okay. I guess since you can't join on the phone, I guess it's possible to just join on the phone and then kind of step out of something else if somebody has something else going on, right?
Yeah. And you can join in via Zoom too, and then just raise your hand, or you can be on the phone and then just sit tight until the item comes up. And I say that it's item number 5 that was in the second draft. Jill is absolutely right. It has not been formally posted yet. It was a draft and it may very well get bumped or moved up, one or the other. So,
and I can definitely, I did talk to our county superintendent, and we're definitely in support of being present and doing that. So one of us will definitely be able to be there.
Great. Thank you, Becky. That's terrific news. Really appreciate that.
And then I just had one other question. Every time I keep talking to her about it, she keeps bringing up that the name Policing the Teen Brain is not a nice sentence. And I just want to make sure that's not our word, right? That's their word.
No,
We don't have any.
that is
control of
their
that.
word.
I
Mhm.
said that and then I was like, I better double check. I don't think we would come up with something called policing the teen brain, but I just wanted to make sure that I was communicating appropriately, because every time I talk to her about it in writing, she keeps writing back, why are we calling it? Like, it's not our choice, so. Okay, any other, Melissa, you were gonna give some more.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there could have maybe been a different name for the class. They're called Strategies for Youth, so you could maybe even refer to it as the vendor's name or the company's name in the
Sure,
class.
the strategies for youth training, yes.
Yeah. So our training division staff has been working with Strategies for Youth to try to get post accreditation for the course. This was the police officer standards and training. And after some back and forth with both Strategies for Youth and Post, it looks like they are not going to be able to certify that course in a way that provides specific credit for that course and reimbursement credit that I was talking about, I don't know, a few meetings ago. And there's a couple of reasons why. Right now, Post is only providing reimbursement for mandated training for law enforcement. So things that the peace officers are required to do annually or semi-annually or biannually, I should say. Those are the only courses that they will reimburse agencies for, unfortunately, and it's probably just a sign of, you know, budgetary restrictions and things like that. Post has also apparently had some difficulty certifying companies that are outside of California. It just makes it more difficult for them to work with groups that are not just doing training within the state, since Post is a state agency. So they generally will focus their efforts on vendors and courses that are presented by people within California. Now we can still put on the course or host the course at, for example, the sheriff's office, and officers can get credit for attending the course. Certain ranks and classifications require ongoing training, so the credit can go towards that ongoing training, but it's not specific credit for, I took a course on policing the teen brain or adolescent training. So I hope that makes sense the way I described it, but we were hoping for a post-certified course with reimbursement, but it looks like it's not going to happen that way, which further emphasizes, you know, the need for this funding source. And it's something that, you know, I can certainly bring up next week at the meeting too, that, you know, without agency reimbursement, it makes it really challenging for agencies to be able to dedicate the funding for this training when agencies do have to make sure that they send their officers to the mandated training as well. So, any questions on that, or do I need to let me know if my explanation wasn't very clear?
I think that was clear. I guess my only question is that, am I understanding that they only certify things that are reimbursable, or is it possible to get it? Is that separate?
It's separate. So you can, so reimbursable right now is just for mandated training. There are other post-certified classes that are not mandatory, but they do prefer and put priority towards California-based training companies than out of state. It sounds like it's just hard for them to track out of state companies because they're training all over the place, not just within the state.
Okay. Any other questions for Melissa or Denise about this issue from either the panel or the public?
I just wanted to say that the Board of Supervisors agenda was just published and it doesn't appear that this item is on the agenda.
Oh, no.
Which means it might not have been ready quite yet. Unless Denise, you want to pull it up and look and see if you see it somewhere?
I will pull it up because I did specifically when Agenda 1 was put out.
Well, those are drafts, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I
Right.
did ask Lara Delaney if there was any reason to believe that it wouldn't make the 29th, and she thought it would. So I'll follow up and see what I can track down during the duration of this meeting. Thanks, Jill.
How is that interfacing with the timeline that we have? Is there another meeting in time for that to be heard before the input would not be relevant to the decision?
I'm not sure. There, as far as I know, there can be delays in this decision and getting it's waffling basically with what's going on with the legislative committee, what's going on with our congressperson, what's going on with the board. So there is no fluidity, or there's a good deal of fluidity to the timing of this. And that's why I was trying to keep in good touch with Lara surrounding this so that we could have a good sense of when that would be. But it shouldn't make any difference for us other than, it's just takes more time.
So in regards to when we were planning to go, when it is on the agenda and speak in favor of it,
when it's on the agenda.
Yeah, but the purpose of it is to make sure that people are understanding why we're asking for this and get their support. Who is the actual decision maker?
So it's the board of
board.
Yes, the board of supervisors. So just as a reminder to folks, this is a proposal that we're putting forth to request to have federal earmarks within the range of, what is it, $1 million or $2 million? I couldn't recall the full amount.
Yeah, it's scalable.
And so a request was made to all department heads to essentially submit proposals for, projects across a number of different areas, not just in the space of law enforcement or justice. So we saw that as an opportunity then to submit a proposal to have the police and teen brain training covered, considering, right, we knew we were going to have some issues around post certification, right, and then we also looked at potentially JJCPA funding through the JJCC to cover the cost of this as well, as a preventative, I guess, along with their prevention dollars. But nonetheless, this became another open opportunity. So that's what we did. We submitted a proposal for that. And the board is having to deliberate on the proposals that have been referred to them from the legislative committee. And so we'll just have to wait and see who they prioritize or select to be considered for then, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, for then our lobbyists to then work with our congressperson, who then our congressperson has to go and battle it out in DC.
Okay. So I happen to have the Golden Gate School is going on a trip to DC next week, and they have a meeting with our congressperson. Would it be good for them to talk to him about this? They're going with their principal and some school staff, and they already have a meeting. So, and this is like our group of kids at our school, Golden Gate, which is kids who've had interaction, a lot of them with law enforcement.
Which congressman are you meeting with?
With Mark DeSaulnier.
Yeah. So DeSaulnier. Yeah.
DeSaulnier.
Congressman DeSaulnier is a huge supporter. So that he's gotten us earmarks this year that we're still awaiting, but I don't see why it would be a problem. Patrice, what do you think?
I don't know. I do want to be respectful of our other partners who are also, in a sense, kind of competing, right? And so if the board makes a decision for which proposals they want to prioritize, I certainly wouldn't want to circumvent that decision making, but I don't think there's anything wrong, at least with regards to this specific funding source, okay, with these earmarks. But I don't think there's anything wrong with raising the issue to Congressman DeSaulnier about the need for more training of law enforcement around adolescent development. And so in any way that he can support helping our local communities find the resources to be able to do so, knowing that we have local police departments, we have our sheriff department, we have probation, all in favor of this. I would even say even DA, all in favor of having this training be made available countywide is I think is a pretty important thing to share with them. So, but I don't want us to have competing messages for that funding source. That's my gut reaction. Again, just in respect of the process.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest unless I thought it was something that I know from talking with the students that is something that they feel strongly about already, do you know? So I think it's a good way to actually connect their meeting and their advocacy in regards to something that I know from talking with the students that is important to them, you know, that, and we've had lots of different focus groups in different sorts of ways where it has come up, you know, to talk about with our students who do have contact about this subject and the way in which, you know, things can escalate and get misperceived and all of that. So they have a lot of them have lived experience. And I think it would be, I have another kind of ulterior motive too, which is that some of them are working on obtaining their seal of civic engagement, which is a distinction that can go onto their transcripts. And in regards to that, they have to engage in a project where they advocate for something. And so if that's something, it's kind of a good coincidence, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So
I agree with everything Patrice said, and the idea, the theory of it, I think is the concept to discuss, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think it nationally, this should be something that's done. I don't think it's just Contra Costa County specific.
Exactly. I mean, I think the fact of the lack of the existence of a mandated requirement or a post-certified course even being available speaks to a larger issue that, right, you can try to solve it in every municipality, or you can do something that changes the tone of all of that. So, okay, good. Anything else about this item?
Looks like Cheryl has her hand up.
Cheryl.
Just FYI, on the earmark funds, because I did just come back from DC about a week and a half ago. And I met with Mark and I met with Eric Swalwell. And, you know, a lot of these funds just got dispersed. They're called community project funding now. They don't call them earmarks anymore. So just FYI. I didn't know why, but I guess it sounds better. The community project funding. But Mark just brought back what? $2 million, 10 million, 8, 10 million back to Contra Costa for a variety of projects. So you may want to look at what those projects were. First, just a little bit of a warning. So that you have a good idea of what that is first, because I'm not sure now is a good chance to go back and get more funding, because this is the period for this kind of funding is over for right now. So yeah, because they have periods of time when they can get this kind of funding, and it's tied to the IIJA, the Infrastructure and Innovations Jobs Act. So I think that's what you may want to take a look at. And they came together on some of the funding, Mark and Congressman Thompson and even Swalwell in that part where he overlaps Alameda County. And then he had some other funding that he got with Senator Padilla and other funding with Dianne Feinstein and Padilla. So there's other ways to skin the cat with trying to come together with the senators, but it's the way that you word it. So I would take a look at the wording, and you know that Contra Costa, the county, and Mark is very, very aware that many people in the county are very skittish about how we're dealing with law enforcement. So maybe the way that it's worded might be a little bit different. Okay, so from the community standpoint, yeah. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's all good information. I'm very ignorant of the way of all these things work, so I appreciate everybody chiming in. I would think that in regards to the students speaking, they're just going to speak from their own experience about, you know, they're not going to talk about federal earmarks or community partnership funding, but just kind of talking about the need for the training based upon their own experience as a youth in the community. And then, you know, just I can make sure that the principal is aware of this topic. But I think maybe just like, even if it's too bad, it sounds like perhaps for this cycle, it's not the right time frame, and I understand that concept, but just at least to kind of give more community voice to the issue itself. And that's like a real face, like the actual kids who we're talking about. So
right. And but I want to make sure that they're not set up for thinking they're going to go in and give a certain response.
Yeah.
So maybe when you talk to the principal, look at where the pot of money, where he's already earmarked the community funds, and some of that money can go towards what the students are talking about. Because that's, you know how I feel about community voice. We want the community voice, and we really should have the students' voices heard.
Yeah.
We don't want them going in being disappointed. So looking at where this money, where he's bringing back the money to the district, and maybe the instructors and the adults can help understand that conversation and help lead the pitch towards that money that has already been garnered back to the district, so we can figure out where that money can come from. That's my point. My point is not to not ask for the money, but to know where to ask for the money to emanate.
How would we find that information? Because I don't know.
I have an article that I can send to you.
Perfect.
And that talks about the basics, but then I can download the report, because you need the full report. But there's an article that was printed about our area.
Okay. Jill, did you have something to add to?
I was just going to say that's this year, this year's, and all of that money is attached to something, a program. And I think what you're discussing is 2023. That's what Denise is looking forward for, opportunities going forward, not what's already happened currently. So I think it's an and.
I think that, just kind of speaking about their experience, and then speaking about, maybe even I can give to the principal the data that we've published, to make sure that the data that this body has published, which tells a very strong story about the disproportionality being stronger amongst the youth, then, that's kind of one bullet point, a very important one, but one thing that's kind of clear, that the need for the training surrounding youth incarceration is because it's even greater than the disparity in the adult population. Okay, anything else about this? Denise, did you want to add anything else, or were you just clarifying the timeline?
I was just clarifying and speaking to what Jill already pointed out, that our current application is for next fiscal year for 2023. All funds for 2022 have been distributed. I also just received an email back from Lara Delaney that this item is on the agenda, but it is on the consent items, not the discussion items. So I'm not sure what that means for if we want to bring it forward
Did she say what's the agenda item number?
No, she didn't. So I've been going through it, trying to find it, and I have yet to see it.
So just as a little civics 101, if it's a consent item, then if somebody at the point in time that they consider consent items, which is at the top of the meeting, and they are not going into closed session on this meeting because of the Cesar Chavez celebration, So they'll be doing the closed session after that. So they will be opening the meeting at 9 a.m. They will consider the consent items. If any callers want a consent item pulled for discussion, they would then, raise their hand during that time. It would be asked if anybody has any comments on any item on the consent calendar, then that item would be removed. The Board of Supervisors would vote for all the consent items in one vote. And then under D7, consider consent items previously removed. So any consent items that somebody had a public comment on would then be discussed at D7.
Okay, I found it. Sorry, Jill, I was listening to.
Number is it?
It is C61 on the agenda.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah. Oops. So it's on there.
So
But
does that mean that if we'd like to make a public comment about it, that we should do it at the beginning of the meeting when they ask if anybody has public comment? Is that the time?
So you would say that you want to discuss that you would like C61. You have comments on C61. They would then pull that. And then those public comments would be taken at D7 on the agenda. I don't know if you all have the agenda up in front of you. I will put it in the chat, the link, so you can look at the agenda. And when they get to D7 on the agenda is when they would take public comments on that item.
I'm just intrigued about what it would mean if it's just a consent and not a prioritization, unless somebody has pulled their request for funding.
So it looks like based on the recommendations from staff, it's authorizing, they're requesting to authorize county administrators to submit the following project funding requests, which include ours. So I don't think we'll be necessarily advocating that we be selected. It looks like we are part of the package that will be requested. So that's good news.
Okay.
So given that, do we not want to remove it from the consent agenda? Because having it in the consent agenda will consider, because they do it all at once, right? Does it work the same as a school board meeting?
Yeah,
or?
you don't, yeah. So as it's worded here, these projects have been put forth. And so for their vote on it, then they're saying, yes, we are going to put forth policing the team brain training program is item number 5 on that board resolution. So, and they're asking for an earmark of 1.18.
Yeah.
For
And
that. So it's they're already asking. There's no need to advocate for them to ask.
Yay.
Oh,
Well, that's
wow.
good news then.
yeah.
Wow, that is great news.
But now if you want, I guess if you want to go to the BOS and say, thank you.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome to do that. The other thing too, I want to highlight is that the DA's office is also part of the package as well for their transitional age youth diversion program, which is something that when we originally heard that they were also submitting a request for that we didn't want to compete with that, because that is something that is also of interest, not only to this body, but for many of us that's doing work in this space, and was hoping that there would be a consideration for both to go forward. And it looks like that did happen. So a big win for young people for sure on this.
Now,
And
I was
just-
under I'm sorry, Jill, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, and just the board resolution does state that we have already received 4.7 million in the 2022 earmarks. So it does call that out here.
Right. I was also under the impression, though, that these earmarks don't necessarily add up to the sum that we have for the projects for fiscal year 2023, because it looks like it's $1, 2, 3, 4, $5, $6 million for the 2023 projects. And my understanding then was that there was going to be a discussion for the prioritization of those. So what I see here is that 7 projects have been submitted, but there are 6 projects have been submitted for a total of over $7 million. We can generally expect to receive $2 to $3 million at most a year. So we're not going to get funding for all of this. That's
I
not
mean,
correct.
we could get into a long discussion about this, but my understanding is that there hasn't been earmarks for quite a long time. That these earmarks we got in 2022 is the first ones they've gotten in a long time. That they generally stopped doing earmarks. And so what we're doing is saying, hey, we got them in 2022. Let's go for and try and get them for 2023. It can't hurt, right?
Okay. But we're still not prioritizing them. These 6.
No, they're just all going to be asked for. There's no reason to prioritize. You just ask for everything you want and maybe we'll get something.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we don't prioritize, Congress does.
Well, I
Is
think that probably happened during the legislative committee meetings, depending on how many proposals they received, right? Or is this all the proposals they received and then they just referred them all to the board?
Yeah, I don't know when they did this because it wasn't on the last ledge committee. So I'm not sure when they did this, but it could just be that, you know, Lara working with our lobbyists, the lobbyists could have said, hey, give us them all. Give us everything you've got so far. That's oftentimes what they do.
Interesting. Okay. So do we need then to talk about this? I'm sorry, the only reason why I asked is because I've sent out a couple of emails to a number of people about this to be ready for March 29th, and please speak on this. I've just been spearheading this and now I think I need to take the spear out, so.
I think the best thing to do is to send the agenda item in the staff report to folks and then let them decide whether or not they want to speak on it or not, specifically those that you are prepping to speak on it. So because I think the recommendation is quite clear. They're not, it doesn't look like the projects are competing with each other, which is the impression we were under initially. It looks like they're going to push them all forward. So you can leave it to those who leave it to them to decide whether or not they want to.
Yeah, my best suggestion is let it go. Be grateful, keep your fingers crossed. Our congressional delegation can get us money, but if you start having people call in at that point in time at the meeting, it's going to be a very, very long day tomorrow on some of these other items with that and the Cesar Chavez celebration. And then they have to end their day with closed session since it's a done deal and it's already just going to be asked. And I think we just move on. That's my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who's been working on this. That's a wonderful outcome. So. Okay, from not thinking we were on the agenda to being pushed all the way through, that's about as good as you can get. So wonderful. Okay, so any more comment on this item about the police training in general? Any public comment about it, or any questions about the training? Or I think we've exhausted the Board of Supervisors part of it, but anything else that people want to ask or know about the actual training? Because we do have some people who haven't been with us all around. I want to give an opportunity if people have questions.
The only thing I'll say is that we'll just keep after Tuesday. We'll let the dust settle a little bit, and then we'll do some follow-ups from our office just to see where things landed or what the next steps are, and then we can bring that back to a future data subcommittee meeting. I won't say we will bring it back by next meeting, but a future meeting.
Great. Okay. So our next item is to look at the work plan update. And I did draft this out. What I did was just to take our work plan, and which is from the very beginning, from the recommendations that came from the task force and were translated into the work plan. I removed a couple columns that had the person responsible and the timeline, just so I could add another column on the end, which says the progress as of March 2022. And then I took what Chris had provided to us before in his PowerPoint, where he had talked about our accomplishments that we've worked on over time. And also just look through our quarterly reports that we have given to the larger body about our subcommittee. And I tried to categorize those into the different projects. Very much definitely a draft. And so I thought if we could look at it together and people might have comments. I literally just lifted the language from Chris's PowerPoint, which was not, so there might be some language things that need to be modified or other things that people feel like might fit in different places, because I did have to kind of make a choice about what project things were going to go into. So maybe
Okay, would you like me to share my screen?
that would be great.
Okay,
I was just
sure.
thinking, I don't have it. I'm so old school. I always print these out because I can't handle looking at the people on the page and everything on there. So, but yeah, if you could project it, that would be awesome. Then we could look at it all together. Great. So here we have for the first objective, which is to support the collection and reporting of accurate data in all criminal justice and law enforcement agencies countywide. There are several activities in the next column that are linked to that objective. And then there's a column that kind of like has the deliverable in it, right? So, and then just to remind everybody about the structure of this, there's kind of like the things that we were tasked with beginning with, and then the things as resources become available. So that's a structure throughout the document. So in regards to the deliverable of ORJ or other county entity identified by the Board of Supervisors, maintaining an up-to-date website or web page with information about and links to publicly available data related to the demographic, criminal justice, law enforcement, and education patterns present within the jurisdiction of interest. These would be sources of data where data could be viewed by race and ethnicity. So we definitely have done a lot of things in regards to this. And so that's what's written there in the last column. That's what I added, was where it says progress as of March 2022. So as you guys all know, we've been receiving data on a regular basis from both probation, the county office, and the sheriff's office. And we have been supporting and promoting county race ethnicity, the data website, where we've published the data that ORJ put together from the publicly available data that we had. And then we have been supporting and making data requests written as well as via Zoom to local county agencies and organizations. And so to date, we have requested data from the DA's office, as well as the oral presentations that we've done at the mayor's conference and the city manager's meeting. I don't know if anybody has any suggestions about, just wording to make that, if we want to make that more specific, or if people think it's fine like that. And then in regards to item 3 over here, where it says implement a marketing and advertising initiative to acknowledge and publicly praise government agencies voluntarily collecting and providing data. We did at one point request a commendation to probation for their engagement with the subcommittee as the first agency to really robustly share their data. And I mean, at this point, the sheriff's office, has kind of joined in. But at that point, probation was the first, and we did formally request that they forward that recommendation for commendation to the Board of Supervisors. And then formally request detailed demographic and outcome data from the DA's office. I guess I did maybe put this in a little bit more detail down here. And then presented to the mayor's conference in November 2021 to ask for their assistance in releasing data from their police LEAs. So is there anything else that people want to add or wordsmith on the things that we've done regarding this objective?
Yeah, I want to make a request that we remove ORJ from the required deliverables here. I know you have ORJ or other county entity. I think it's safe to assume that going forward, whenever the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice will open, that a lot of the work coming from this body is going to be held within that wheelhouse. And then again, after hearing the discussion at the last PPC meeting, there's definitely going to be a lot more interfacing from this body with CAO's office and PPC members at the very least. So ORJ, as you know, it's just one little small unit within the probation department. We'll continue to be participants of the full body, but I think holding the responsibility of the data analysis and all that good jazz is probably dated at this point.
So that is nothing that I wrote. That's what's in the original plan. So I don't know whether we want to, I mean, I think we could make a revision like that. We would just have to be explicit about the fact that we're changing the original plan, because that is nothing, I haven't touched that part of it, if that makes sense. So
no, and I understand, and that's why if this was a discussion about work plan updates,
yeah,
we're making a revision. So that's the revision that I'm requesting. And
I hear you. I just wanted to make sure that I just for the clear understanding of everybody present, I just wanted to make sure that people knew that I didn't write that part, is what I was trying to say.
No, and I'll give, and just to back you up on that for further context, as folks may know, that the Office of Reentry and Justice, before it got to the probation department, sat within the CAO's office, which then it made sense, right?
Yeah.
But now we are a former member of another department with various peers that are all kind of looking at the same thing with regards to data. So even though we have a research team, we certainly can't take on the full breadth of all of this. So.
Understood. Do you think one way in which we could address that is just to actually delete everything before the word maintain, so that we're just removing the part that says who's going to do it, so that the sentence could just begin with maintain an up-to-date website or web page with information about links? Oh, I think you mean.
Sorry, I think that's fine. I would, I'd like to hear from others if they feel it's imperative that we identify now who would be the holder or the entity responsible. I know sometimes that having a who is responsible, so to speak, in a work plan is really critical. But I'm okay with that at least being just the general sense of what the expectation will be around posting information on the webpage.
What are people's thoughts? I mean, I don't really think we can replace it. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Walker, please.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on what the details of the discussion were at BBC with regard to the transition of ORJ to the Office of Racial Equity. Do we have any idea about the timeline on that or when that's happening?
So there's no transition of ORJ to the Office of, I know all these acronyms, and then they're the same letters, gets everybody mixed up. So the Office of the Office of Reentry and Justice will remain within the probation department. That won't change. What will likely change is the staffing support, the data and the data analysis support for the racial justice oversight body. That transition over to the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice when it does in fact come online. And so what Jill was mentioning earlier is that there's internal discussions happening now to say, okay, that office may take a minute before that opens up or comes online, but what can be done in the meantime? And so that's a discussion between supervisors and CAO to kind of troubleshoot that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
As someone who is a non-expert in any way about any of this, can I ask what maybe is a basic question? But the office that is currently being formed, which is there's approval for the idea of this Office of Social Justice and Racial Equity, right? It's happening. There's been meetings happening about that. Am I right in thinking that that is going to be under the auspices of the county administrator's office, or is it not? Or is that not a simple question?
I think it's not a simple question.
Okay.
Where things stand now, and Jill can correct me if I'm wrong on this, there's just ongoing community engagement process around the formation of it. its responsibilities. So the nuts and bolts of where would be placed within county government, or within county structure, what its actual operations will be, that I don't think that I don't think that there's been anything defined around that just yet. So, but I will say though, there is Measure X funding that was allocated to support the creation of this office. So that's, a good sign that there is, beyond just discussion around it, there is some commitment there through allocation of funding. I forget how much. But those details that you're asking about, I think we're all sort of on pins and needles waiting to hear, but we just don't know yet.
Got it.
We don't know, but yes, Becky, the presumption is it would be similar to what RJ was housed with CIO, just because it's going to collaborate along and throughout the county. And
Yeah.
so where that's housed is key. And I can tell you that space has been identified for it in the new building that's going to be built where the current 651 Pine sits. So they've already identified office space there for it.
Is that the old spooky building where we used to meet in the basement?
It's my old home.
Is that the one?
Spooky
Yeah.
building.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, that's great, because I do think that, especially as we're asking other government agencies to release potentially personal data, it does seem like we'll have a greater success with that if that does sit within a governmental structure of some sort, I think. Because it's personal, personal individual data that we're looking for.
Well, it's definitely part of the county structure, for
Okay.
sure. It's not a private, separate
Yeah,
oversight. It's really meant to be within the county structure to bring together all the different
Got it.
efforts.
Okay.
Yeah.
like, as I said, I was asking this question of somebody who doesn't know about it. So that's very helpful. Okay, so at this time, I feel like it would be difficult to replace what's in there with anything more specific, because we don't have anything more specific, right? We can't really say anything else. So Patrice, you feel strongly that we need to do something to change what's in there right now?
We could just make it more general. We just know for sure ORJ won't be the other entity.
Right.
That's for certain. So whether we want to say when the office opens, or so I don't know, but I just wouldn't want it, for the purposes of this work plan that we will be working from for this year and presumably next year. I just don't feel comfortable tying
Right.
our office.
It's not our current understanding of what's happening. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
So does anybody have an objection to the idea of just removing the first part of the sentence to say who's going to do it? And just start with the word maintain?
And I'm not a member of this body, but I think that's an excellent solution, because that still identifies what needs to be done. And so that's the question that's being asked, is what does RJOB need that ORJ can't do? And this is one of those areas. And so in the meanwhile, if there's something else or someplace else we can identify that can do that work, then that leaves it open.
And I do think that in the full work plan, there is a whole column that says person responsible or office responsible that's separate. So I just took that off just because that wasn't what I thought we were discussing. I thought we were just adding the progress part on it. So once something more specific gets decided, it can be updated in that column. Okay, and I'm guessing that we're going to make these changes, then we're going to bring it back and we're going to vote on it and then bring it to the larger body, since we're making changes to the larger body's plan. Does that sound like the correct process, Jill, our parliamentarian here? I'm saying, like, I don't think we can change this plan as a subcommittee. We have to take it back to the full body.
So is this, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought this was the subcommittee work plan. Is this the overall body's work plan?
It's our subcommittee work plan, but we didn't make it up. It came from the recommendations of the task force originally, which came, when the whole body was created. Or can we? If we can, then we
I
can.
think we can make edits to this, considering it is the work plan of this subcommittee, and then bring it forward to the full body. sharing with them
Quarterly.
what changes, what
Yeah,
changes
okay.
we've made, and why, and
Okay,
their endorsement or what have you.
so should we collect all the changes and what we're adding and do the whole thing all together, or should we talk about each point as we go? I mean, we're talking about, but I'm saying, like, does anybody have a problem with the idea of getting rid of the first thing right now? Okay. Can we scroll down to see the next? Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to say, was there anything else that people should add in terms of the things that we've made progress on, or anything that you think could be worded in a clearer way from the far right column? Dr. Walker, were you gonna? No, okay. You're square. Up, so. Okay, so let's go to the second one. No problem. Thank you, Patrice, for being here. So objective 2 is in an effort to create greater transparency and accountability of county criminal justice and law enforcement agencies, the ORJ shall publish data related to the demographic, criminal justice, law enforcement, and education patterns present within the county by race, ethnicity. And this is where it says to develop an online format or dashboard to be easily accessed by the public agencies, and nonprofit organizations. And the deliverable being as resources and public agency and law enforcement participation allows, develop local web-based data dashboards for public access, and data should be presented by race, ethnicity, easily accessible, and updated annually. And our progress on that is that data was prepared and published on the website, and the website was shared with Cbos and other groups.
Becky, I can also add here that our office has consolidated the quarterly data on the intakes for juveniles.
Yeah.
And we are in our process of reviewing it and putting in notes and key takeaways on those. And my hope is that next month, when our group meets and we present you with the new round of quarterly data for this calendar year, that we can go through that with the body, and you can see everything collapse for the 200 plus youth that were intakes into the hall last year.
Perfect. I think that will really serve us well as we move forward. You know, I think looking at it quarterly has been helpful, but I think the idea of having a digest of the annual, as we discussed at our last meeting, is helpful as we go forward and we have multiple years. We're not going to be wanting to look at quarters. So
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. So what we have on the website already is information about the outcomes as they relate to race and ethnicity. So we have done what has been asked there with the data that was available that Denise was able to do. Do we have a problem with the fact that it says ORJ in the objective? Do we want to try to change that, or?
I think we should.
Okay.
Because while we have, provided that, analysis up to this point moving forward, we will continue to provide this body with the quarterly data, but I'm not sure. It sounds like once the other office is up, or once they have hired that staff, those tasks will fall to them.
Mm-hmm. So maybe, again, we could just take out the Office of Reentry and Justice shall, and just leave it to say, in an effort to create greater transparency and accountability of county criminal justice and law enforcement agencies, publish data related to. Just take out the actor clause of the sentence.
That makes sense to me. But again, I'm not a voting member on this body, so.
Okay. How do people on the panel feel about that? And also, is there any public comment about that change?
I agree.
Oh, I agree too. I would just recommend maybe saying in an effort to create greater transparency and accountability of county criminal justice and law enforcement agencies, data shall be published related to demographics, just for grammatical.
Data shall be published.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not an English teacher. I'm a teacher, but I'm not an English teacher, so appreciate anybody who is an English teacher brain. Okay, good. Data shall be published related to. Good. Any other comments about this objective in general? Okay, so maybe we can move to the next page. Objective 3. So this objective again starts with the Office of Reentry and Justice shall support analysis of interventions implemented through the Racial Justice Task Force to measure efficacy and assess impact on racial disparities. All activities under this objective shall be reported to the RJOB and any other bodies, collectives identified by the Board of Supervisors. So this is a little trickier to remove, just remove it. I guess we could say support analysis of interventions implemented. And also, I don't know if the task force is the right thing, because the task force was what created the body, right? So it's not that's not an active group. Oh, Melissa has her hand up. Thank you. Save me, Melissa.
Oh, no, I was just going to say the same thing. I was wondering if task force is correct. I think that should be replaced by the RJOB. And then I think in our last conversation, we talked about, you know, that analysis will also be done outside of the ORJ.
Yeah.
But can they also make determinations of the effectiveness of the interventions? I'm not sure. I assume so, but maybe others have thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like this is the next step, right? I mean, there is definitely a progression to these things. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, I have read through this objective several different times and I don't even understand what it's saying, quite frankly. Office of Reentry and Justice, I mean, you can take that out, shall support analysis of interventions implemented through the through the Racial Justice Task Force to measure. The Racial Justice Task Force didn't implement interventions.
Right.
They made recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, which the Board of Supervisors took, I think, 19 out of 21 of those recommendations and tasks the Racial Justice Oversight Body to follow up with them. So I'm not sure what this is even trying to get at.
Maybe, and this is a big maybe, but maybe the idea that the data subcommittee in an ongoing manner would have a function to try to connect the efficacy and the impact of any, like, for example, if we were to get funding for the, what is it called besides policing the teen brain, the strategies for youth program, and implement it, and then to assess whether that made an impact on, I mean, I think they do it, right? That's part of what they do, is they provide some technical assistance regarding that. But the idea that the data subcommittee would have a role in the ongoing evaluation of whether the things that are happening are actually making a difference. That's what I took away from the language, but it is definitely clunky.
Right. So the RJOB is supporting analysis of, or whatever office. So the task is analysis of interventions to measure efficacy and assess impact on racial disparities, right? Okay. I mean, isn't that what it's trying to say? But
yeah, but it's kind of hard to do those things when we don't know who is, I mean, I guess it's no different than the other projects in a way, but it just feels a little stranger.
It's another objective that needs support, right?
Yeah.
So it's another highlighted point of this is why you need something sooner rather than later.
Right. So I guess we could take out Office of Reentry and Justice shall support and just say support analysis of interventions implemented through the RJOB. Or just in general, like
I think analysis. I think you could take out, I think you just analysis of interventions to measure efficacy and assess impacts on racial disparity.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay, analysis of interventions to measure efficacy and assess impact on racial disparities.
I think that's what you guys are
Okay.
going after.
Yeah.
Okay. And then all activities under this objective to be reported to the RJOB and any other bodies, collectives identified by the Board of Supervisors. That seems kind of like just how we do business. Yeah. I don't know, is that any different? I mean, everything that we do, we bring back to them. So is that important? Does anybody feel that's important?
Excuse me, this is Dale.
Hi, Dale.
I'm wondering if it shouldn't say analyze interventions. It's awkward to start the sentence out by saying analysis of interventions. Our
Yeah.
objective is to analyze an
Right.
analysis. Your objective is to analyze interventions implemented, right?
Yeah. Analyze interventions implemented to measure efficacy and assess impact on racial disparities.
Yeah. That sounds-
Technically,
that sounds-
technically, you're measuring the outcomes of the interventions, technically.
Okay. Analyze
right? So you're
outcomes.
not- You're examining the intervention to assess the outcomes, to measure and assess the efficacy and impact of surrounding racial disparities.
Can I just ask you guys a question? Who's the audience for this?
Well, certainly us, so we know what we're trying to do.
But
And as
is it-
we, Mhm.
Isn't it the public? Is it not the public as well? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think to make transparent the work that is planned and the work that has been done. Mhm.
Okay, so can we just not use plain English? Because I know all of us understand efficacy and we all understand this. I just think it's better just to use plain. My mother used to tell me, Cheryl, don't use a $10 word when you can use a 25-cent word.
Yeah. Mhm.
So don't use efficacy, use effectiveness, use efficiency,
Mhm.
use words that people understand what we're trying to get to. It's just my two
Yeah.
cents.
You can change that to impact, something along those lines. Because what, to measure,
Perfect.
Okay.
really what you want to know is, are these interventions addressing the racial disparities in our system? Are they reducing
Yes,
the racial disparities? So
yes.
you can definitely make it simpler. I agree, Cheryl.
How about analyze outcomes of interventions to measure impact on racial disparities?
Perfect.
I know exactly what Cheryl's talking about. I once had a very good, when I was a site principal, I had a really good editor who every week would take me to task with my newsletter and say, why did you use 6 words here when you could have just used one simple one? And yes, I understand. It really does make a difference over time. So clarity, we want to be clear and we don't want the words to stand in the way of anybody understanding what we're trying to say. So a good point. What about the second part, the all activities? Do we need that there, or is that for the whole plan?
No, I think that that's important because I think there's
Okay.
a lot of crossover between this and a variety of other advisory bodies. So it gives you that
Okay.
reminder to share.
Great. Right, because we might remember now, but in the future, we want to make sure that it's always remembered. Good. Okay, so next column, the activities. The annual review of criminal justice and law enforcement outcomes to assess the presence of racial disparities. And make recommendations to improve programs and practices related to the elimination and reduction of any racial disparities. Deliverable being, as resources become available, develop annual reports surrounding criminal justice, law enforcement, and educational outcomes by race ethnicities. Pending data availability, these reports would also assess programmatic outcomes and interventions by race, ethnicity, and provide recommendations to improve programs and practices as necessary. And the things that we have done thus far, We learned that there is no mandated developmental training for police LEAs and no post-certified training available for elective training. Maybe I should have put in here surrounding, I guess I said developmental training for police LEAs. Somebody help me with the language here. What should this say? I think you know what I'm trying to say, but.
Well, I don't know where you are, but I'm looking at the activity. And
I
it
went on
says,
to the progress here, but go ahead. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
so it says activities when additional resources become available to the ORJ or a Contra Costa Racial Equity Office opens. I think that needs to be changed to activities when additional resources become available for this work or something like that. Because you're defining that.
How about when resources are dedicated or I mean, they're not going to just become available. It's something that somebody has to do. That's why like they're not going to just develop, right? When activities, when additional resources are identified. And that, I think that language is actually on the second project too. Yeah. So I'll change it there. Activities when additional resources are identified. Okay. Yeah, there's more in there too, right? So I didn't read that part of it when we were going across. So number 3 is conduct assessment of any interventions designed to reduce racial disparities. We're talking about things that we've implemented, right? So should we add the word implemented in there? Conduct assessment of any implemented interventions designed to reduce disparities? Or is that just making it more wordy? I guess we are assessing them as, like, for example, with the one that we did end up, we assessed it for its appropriateness as well as assessing the results, right? There's the 2 parts of it. There's assessing what's needed and there's assessing the outcomes. What do you think that this one is meaning in number 3? The outcomes, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
because the outcome is ideally a reduction in the racial disparity.
So conduct assessment of interventions implemented designed to reduce racial disparities.
Assessment of any interventions. Well, again, it's the outcomes of the intervention, so that have been designed that way. So I would say conduct assessment of outcomes.
From
Intervention outcomes designed to reduce racial disparities.
conduct assessment of any intervention outcomes designed to reduce racial disparities. Intervention outcomes. Okay. What do people think? Conduct assessment of any or maybe not any, right? That makes sense. Conduct assessment of intervention outcomes designed to reduce racial disparities. That's a coherent sentence now, I think. Okay. The next part, conduct comprehensive assessment of current data capacity for relevant CBOs and other agencies to report data that allows for an assessment of impact on racial justice task force, racial justice oversight body, alternatives and interventions.
So what I will say about this is that to conduct an intervention and actually conduct then an evaluation of the interventions and assessing the outcomes is a process. And our office has been in the process of training our community-based partners, and because we are moving in that direction so that we can gather the data for that. So to conduct an assessment of current data capacity for relevant CBOs, I think that makes sense, because what we're seeing is that not all of our partners are, they're not all on the same plane when it comes to data collection and knowledge as it relates to how do you do this work. So having a sense of gearing them up for it, because a lot of the data needs to come from them so that we can actually assess the longer term outcomes.
And that is what the next bullet says, is to support through consultation and training the development of capacity in relevant agencies to collect, report relevant data showing impacts of reforms. So I think this item 4 is distinct from 5 in that it's saying learn where we need to support and then support, right?
Well, I would argue that since the county has not ever really, from everything I can tell, have a practice in place for examining this, that almost all contracts should be moving in this kind of direction. And for example, our office is not doing all of our new contracts for AB 109 services this way, but we are moving in a direction where logic models are expected, outcomes are expected, things that need to be reported that are expected to be the purpose of the intervention, so we can look at that. It's a different kind of assessment and evaluation, but we're moving in that direction. And it's so staff-wise, units need to think about what it takes in order to get that done.
And I would say that just from the recent conversation that we had in the JJCC data subcommittee, and looking at the probation annual, or what's it called, the annual report, in the end, the report,
report, yeah,
that there's a clear need to identify what is expected in that regard, because right, we're kind of starting from
starting from scratch.
We're starting from the bottom. Now we're here. Yes. So is that captured in the language that's here? I think number 5 to me seems good, but number 4 is maybe where we need a little bit of words.
Yeah.
Because we kind of know at this point that we need number 5. But do we need to number 4 anymore? Or do we already know that we need to number 5?
Seems to me that number 5 does it.
Kind of what I was thinking is that if we could just maybe get rid of number 4.
Yeah.
It's always better to have 4 things instead of 5. Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed from just getting rid of number 4? I don't think we're going to forget about that, because it'll become obvious as we do number 5.
Right.
Okay. Great.
Can I make a suggestion too?
Please.
On number 5, you say collect and report relevant data. I would actually also add conduct. The evaluation.
Evaluation and report, collect, conduct evaluation and report.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Support through consultation and training the development of capacity in relevant agencies to collect, conduct evaluation, and report relevant data showing impacts of reforms. Okay. Looking at the far right column, I just tried to capture the fact that we had conducted, basically, I guess the first bullet as I'm thinking about it is like, that is one of the things we learned. I don't know if that's really important to note, but I guess it was kind of a process for us to go through to identify that. But maybe it's not necessary if we have the next thing, which says selected policing the teen brain program to provide comprehensive training for all police LEAs in the county and applied for. So maybe like some of those words need to change what's in there, because I think I heard you guys use a different word than federal earmark.
It's Federal Community Funding Project, I believe.
Community funding project.
Yes. Or project, Federal Community Projects Funding is the earmark funding.
Federal Community Project Funding.
Funding.
Okay. Federal Community Project Funding to finance the training. Do you guys think that the first thing is important, or should we just not say that we learned that there is no mandated, I mean, that was part of the process, but that might not be an outcome.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think we need the first paragraph.
And then the last thing is plan in place to provide presentation from Hayward Burns Institute for the upcoming May 2020 quarterly meeting on how we measure race, ethnicity in the criminal justice system. That's nothing that happened yet, but since we had discussed having that, I put that in there for our discussion of whether we want to include it, even though it hasn't happened yet. I don't know. Maybe not. This is like every Zoom class happening across the country. The class has grown tired of responding to the Zoom.
Actually, without knowing exactly everything that's going to be included in that presentation,
Yeah.
I almost feel like that applies more towards the data collection than the solutions or the what are we calling them, like interventions that we're going to recommend or implement.
Right.
So I think there will probably be items that come from that presentation, but whether you want to put it as a placeholder in one of the other objectives, I just think maybe not in this one.
I think that's a good point. I think I kind of ran out of time is what happened, is I had kind of dumped them all into all the outcomes in one place, and then I was trying to sort them, and or maybe I just couldn't tell which one it could go in, but I hear what you're saying. That maybe is did you think objective 1? To support the collection reporting of data in all criminal justice, or into 2, to create greater transparency?
Probably in 1 in the
maybe, huh?
Data collection.
Yeah. But I guess the question is, do we even want to, like, I'm just worried, what if we put it in here and then it doesn't come to pass? Because I don't feel like we've had complete confirmation that it's going to happen at that time. So maybe it's better just not to put it in there.
I agree with that. Because one of the things that, thinking of these objectives, that I think we should do while we're still waiting for the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice to open, one of the things we can do as a group is really identify what data we want, how we want it to look, so that when they do start, when we are pushing this data, we've already identified what it should look like and what, mimic it after what the juvenile data shows and what the Office of Education data shows. So anyway, that's a long answer to say. I think that hopefully that presentation will help, but I don't know that it's necessarily an item for progress.
I agree. Okay. Anything else that people can think of that we've done that isn't included on here that we should include under one of the projects? I think that we've done really a lot of work, and I know that I really appreciate this group has been so dedicated. Of all the little groups like this that I sit on and do things, I feel like this has had the most consistency of any of those groups in terms of just doing work in between and also just showing up and being here. So I really appreciate everybody who has been here, and I feel like I wish we were in person, Dr. Walker, so we could, like, I don't know, have a cake or something, or
That's okay. That's okay.
a huzzah to Dr. Walker, but
We'll miss you, Bill.
yeah, we will.
I'll be around.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so we can try to make those changes. I have the Word document version of this, so I can try to make that. I don't know, Christina, if you've been tracking all of these changes, but I'm happy to take a stab at that part of it, because that's a lot.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. And I will send that back over to your guys' office before the next meeting, so we can look at it again and make sure it reflects the conversation we had. Anything else that we want to discuss today in regards to the work plan? Any public comment or thoughts about what we've discussed?
I have a question, Becky, and
Yeah.
I throw this out because, you know, learning that there is no developmental training that's required for law enforcement in the state. Is that something that, you know, we could advocate for, that this body wants to consider, you know, as an activity in some way? Because it's a big deal when we look at the numbers and for the juveniles, and it's really disarming to me to see them and then to know that there is nothing that's required. And so what do we do with that information? I mean, I know we have, you know, what we're doing is we're pursuing funding for the Strategies for Youth program, and that's great. But what about the bigger policy, bigger picture beyond just our jurisdiction? Unless, is it possible, Melissa, that we make our own? Can the sheriff's office sort of mandate expectations surrounding training?
We can, certainly. I mean, we can add to, the departments can add to the requirements of posts. You're not restricted to keep it. You have, that's the minimum. You know, you have to meet the post standards, but you can add more to that. As you're talking about it, I'm just thinking, you know, the police academy has learning domains that are identified by post, and there are numbered domains that are required for all individuals that attend a basic police academy in the state to go to have that information. And I will go back and check with our academy staff to just confirm that I don't believe that there's a specific learning domain regarding the, you know, dealing with juvenile development in that regard. I mean, there's crimes against children, things like that. But let me go back with our staff and just confirm if that is addressed even within another learning domain, or maybe identify a learning domain that it could be included in. And then that would have to go to the post commission, you know, as a recommendation, and we could look at what that process is. That might be a good place to start, is in the academy, in the police academy. So I can at least start with that and report back to this group after I go through. I'm just kind of going based on memory. So, and my academy was, you know, a little while ago. So I'll check with our staff and I can at least report back on that.
I just want to be clear, Denise, your question, I'm not sure if were you asking if the sheriff's department can mandate that the other police LEAs add something, or were you just asking if they add something to their own?
No, I mean, I was pretty clear that the sheriff's office cannot mandate other police departments.
I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same thing. So
when Melissa talks about mandated training requirements, who's actually mandating them? And so if that hasn't happened and we have evidence that we believe is really compelling reason why we should, because that's why we're going down this road. Do we want to also consider an advocacy aspect of this, not just to get our county law enforcement and probation trained, but also consider a component of this that speaks to the broader policy at the state level or the county level or at, whatever level there is for trainings.
Who is the organization or the body
Good
that
question.
sets, I was asking Melissa because I imagine she might know, but that sets the minimum training requirements that a police LEA must do?
And it's post.
Okay. And that's for California specific?
Yes, so it's California Peace Officer Standards and Training. I think
Okay.
it's California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. It's post, that's the accreditation for all state law enforcement. Not federal law enforcement, but just state. And they do not only the basic police academy requirements, but ongoing, we call it advanced officer training, the ongoing requirements that a peace officer must complete yearly or biannually. There's a lot of, it's specific to the number of hours and things like that.
So that would be the body, like, should there be a sweeping change in all police LEAs be required to do it, it would come from that body.
Correct. Yeah.
Or state legislation, which would dictate
Okay.
that body. So assembly member or a senator at the state level could certainly introduce legislation.
Yeah, I was trying to think about like the parallel for schools, and if you had asked me the same question, like, why do we have to do a training every year about integrated pest management? I'm not really sure who decides that we have to do that. OSHA, maybe. I'm not sure, because there are different ones. There are certain things that we have to do that are.
Well, Congressman DeSaulnier, I don't know if it was when he was in the state, but he's the one that passed legislation to do expanded notification on IPM, on pest.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. So it's done through legislation.
Okay, so that's maybe a way that we could advocate it.
So Denise, the answer to your question is, one, what Melissa's talking about, and once it's determined what's being offered, then to come up with the recommendation for our ledge committee if it's not already part of our ledge platform. And then it could be incorporated into the ledge platform is to support any legislation that encourages training for, LEAs for developing brains of adolescents or something along those lines.
Got it. Okay.
It does seem like the kind of thing that would have some pretty broad support, I would imagine,
Yeah, so there's two things you could provide in our legislative packet to support any legislation that's introduced, as well as work with our elected state representatives to introduce legislation.
Okay. Anything else about the items that we have to consider today before we move to talking about next steps in future meetings? Okay. For our next meeting that we have coming up, April 28th. I can't believe that that this is the end of March. I'm like in shock. It just feels like it's been a runaway train this year.
The other day it was 86 getting into my car. It's like April, or not even April, and it's 86. Like,
I know.
Yeah.
It's really pretty wild. Yeah. Thinking about what we are going to put on the agenda for next time. I will definitely bring back the work plan with the edits that we made with a clean copy for people to look at. And then maybe we will have, what else do we need to add to our agenda for next time?
Quarterly reporting.
Great, that's next time, okay.
And that will include our also our annual.
Right, the annual digest or whatever.
Consolidation or
Consolidation.
aggregation of last year's quarterly data.
Right.
As well as, by the way, we're also working on key takeaways in each of those. And so I've just been through editing those today. So we should have most of them for you next time.
Okay. And so that should just be agendized as the quarterly data report and then annual
Yeah.
consolidation
Yeah.
report.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see if I don't know what the timeline is about the adolescent development training. And Jill, do you know what the timeline is on that? Or is that that's for next fiscal year, right? That we're talking about that?
Yeah, that's being submitted for 2023 asks.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just wait to see if when we have an update, then we'll add that back on, but otherwise looks like it's moving smoothly ahead. Anything else that people can think of that we should add to the agenda next time? Okay.
You want to return to the community data forum? Does it make sense to get a debrief from Chris and Shayla on
Yeah,
their
since they weren't here.
perspective on that?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we won't put it in the agenda if no one's going to be here to speak on it, but it would be nice as the presenters to get their perspective on it.
I mean, this is the first meeting in a long time that both of them haven't been here. They both have been very consistent. So hopefully they'll be here. Okay. Well, then I think are there any other final comments before we close the meeting?
In case you don't know, Shayla just had a little baby boy.
That's right.
Oh,
Yes, I remember her saying that. And
she's out on leave. That's right.
Mhm.
Oh.
Do you know his name, Cheryl?
I do, and just because you asked me right now, just because you asked me, right? This is me.
I know how it goes. I have my son's first grade teacher is about to go out on maternity leave too, which is very fun. I love seeing new little people come into the world. It's so fun. So that's good. We'll send her very positive thoughts.
Absolutely.
Her little one.
I will tell her. I'll talk to her next week.
Oh yeah, please do. Send her our thoughts and positive energy with this new little guy. So
I know. I told her your sleeping days are over.
yeah. It's okay. It doesn't last forever. Then eventually.
Yes, it does.
Really?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Rest of your life, because even when they're grown, you can't sleep.
Oh, I know. Yes, I feel like I can sleep now, but they still I've learned that my oldest is 24 and he still is still in my mind all the time. So
You know,
okay.
this conversation is interesting because our youngest grandchild is going to be a senior in college next year.
Oh my goodness. See, I feel so grown up to have a 24-year-old, but that is next level grown up.
Yes, that is. Good for you,
Got your
Dale.
grown up stripes here.
Yes. Good for you, Dale. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. We can close the meeting at 4:50, and thank you everybody for your attention and
Thanks, everyone.
hard
And
work.
again, gratitude, Dr. Walker. Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's been great working with you on this. Bye.
Bye, everybody.